Hello, everyone. Welcome to Context on A News. I'm Anita Sharma. The third anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war saw key European leaders in Kyiv, Russian President Vladimir Putin having a phone chat with China's Xi Jinping, and U.S. President Donald Trump hosting French President Emmanuel Macron. Add to all of this, the UN Security Council now taking a neutral position on the conflict. Let's discuss all of this with my special guests, Olena Halushka from Kyiv. She is the co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory, as well as political analyst Diogo Castro Silva from Sao Paulo. And we have political expert Enrique Cosero from Madrid. Welcome to you all.
Hello.
Hi.
Olena, let's start with you. Let's talk about, I'm not going to call it a showdown. On the surface, it seemed like a friendly meeting between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump at the White House. But there was a lot going on there, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that this is a very good news that French President Macron visited White House, that he had sit down with the American President Donald Trump in order to convince him that it is in the U.S. national security interest to stop the Russian aggression, to make sure that there is lasting peace through strength, as President Trump has basically said during his campaign. And it is impossible without deterring, without stopping Russian aggression, and without punishing Russia, bringing Russia to account. Because what we are seeing today, and yesterday was the third anniversary of the full-scale war, but we have to understand that this is 11 years of the Russian aggression, because it started in 2014 with the occupation of Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and Russia was never brought to account for that. And there were several attempts to regulate the Russian aggression with diplomatic means through Minsk I, Minsk II, and Russia violated the ceasefires. So that's why it's very important that President Trump understands that if he wants lasting peace, it's impossible to achieve it without having Ukraine at the table, without having Europe at the table, because that's the future of the continent, which is presently at stake.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Olena. Diogo, your thoughts on that meeting?
I agree with Elena that it was an important meeting, but one of the things that is difficult for people, especially in the West, I would say in Ukraine, people understand this, in the Baltics, people understand this, is that if an historian would look back, I would say 20, 30 years from now, we are still living the wars of the end of the Soviet Empire. And this, I would say this has been going on even before 2014 with the first Chechen war. So when we come to this question of Ukraine, one difficulty in all these meetings is that people are speaking different languages. For Putin, the question is the sovereignty of Ukraine. And people think that it is about territory. It was never about territory. It was always about sovereignty. And this makes it very hard, especially for people in the West, to have the right framework to understand what is at stake. Territory, in the end, is secondary to the question of sovereignty and independence. And people in the West tend to see this in a more utilitarian way, like if we give some territory or if Ukraine gives some territory, the question is resolved. It is not resolved, because the question in Minsk I, in Minsk II, and now was never about territory. It was always about sovereignty and independence. And I'm afraid if we don't have the right framework in dealing with this situation, this will repeat itself. And this is the crux of the problem we face.
Okay, and we know this is dominating discussions at the White House right now. Enrique, we're talking about Macron essentially having that tete-a-tete with Trump, and very imminently we will have the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also visiting the White House with Trump and already saying that he's going to boost defense spending. Macron, it's a 1-2 punch, right? You got Macron and you have Starmer following up now.
Yeah, and they're playing two. On the first side, they're playing two different games because Macron is completely an insider of the European Union. Keir Starmer is not anymore since 2014, if I remember the Brexit was. Anyway, that those interests probably are they have something in common, and there is something that they're chasing things completely different. For one side, France is looking for an stability in Europe. The United States don't leave the NATO, and making a stable process on the ongoing treaties and the ongoing talks and the ongoing treaties that they want to reach in order to keep stability along Europe, but the United States don't want to make the Atlantic edge is main concern. Their main concern, the United States, Trump's main concern, and it's not only Trump. It was Biden's, it was Obama's. Is actually the Pacific. It's China, it's Taiwan, it's Korea. It's even Australia or Japan. So Europe is not a priority for Donald Trump anymore, and it's not a priority for the United States since 2008, that as much as we can know right now, right? So for Donald Trump, Ukraine is now something that he has to get relief of, that he has to leave, and in order to focus his main attention on the Pacific, as I said. Mm-hmm. So the fastest he can resolve this, the better for the United States. And we have to look at the problem. If we want to talk about the United States, we have to look at the problem with the Americans' eyes. And their eyes are aiming, or their goal is, okay, no more Atlantic X, mm-hmm. just let's gonna focus on the Pacific. And that's the reason why, and I don't mean the means and the way to do it, because probably the means and the way to do it is they're not the most appropriate for doing that. But the goal, the main objective is, okay, let's gonna forget about the Atlantic, let's gonna focus on the Pacific.
All right, I want to pick up on that, the means, the approach that the U.S. is using. Olena, unfortunately for your country, the big discussion here is centering around mineral rights. We know the U.S. is eyeing this squarely as far as Ukraine is concerned, and also, according to Donald Trump, he expects, quote unquote, major economic development transactions on the Russian front. But your president has essentially come out and said, look, the deal that's already on the table, this doesn't really work with me. And I guess the question for you is, does he have a choice here?
I will actually start responding, if I may, commenting on the previous experts' remarks, because I think that what really is missing right now in the debate, that all of those regions and all of those theaters are very deeply connected. Because if you take a look at the nature of this war in 2014, it has been Russia against Ukraine. In 2022, Russia scaled up its war against Ukraine and engaged Belarus. But today, 2025, it is actually the coalition of tyrannies which united together in order to test modern warfare on the battlefield in Ukraine. Take a look what is happening in this war. We are having North Korean troops taking part in the battle, North Korean troops invading a European country. We are having Iranian drones and ballistic missiles. Last night in Kyiv, at my hometown, the air raid was entire night because
Wow.
the drones were flying here and there, and they were Iranian drones. Then China. Again, I mean, China is economically supporting Russia. Without such a support, Russian regime would have already collapsed by now, both politically and economically. So if President Trump truly wants to strengthen the US and partners with regards to the Pacific events, then it's very important to defeat Russia in Ukraine. And on the mineral deal, I have to remind that the idea of the raw materials and minerals, it was first voiced by the President Zelensky in his 5-point peace plan that he presented to the partners in autumn. And I think that Ukrainian government made it very clear that we are interested in getting American investors into our critical materials, critical minerals sector. But what President Zelensky made it also very clear that this deal should foresee future American aid for Ukraine and the effective security guarantees. Because we cannot be speaking about the aid that Ukraine has already received in the form of grants by now between 2022, 2025, and President Trump is very actively using the figure 350 billion, which actually is not true. It was explained by Pentagon, by the State Department, that American aid for Ukraine exceeded a little bit 120 billion dollars. So it's not about 300 billion. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to make it very clear that Ukraine would welcome such a deal, but only in case if it has real security guarantees to make sure that the Russian aggression will not come back to us in a couple of years after Russia rearms, revives its economy and would be ready for a much bigger war with all of the, lessons learned.
For sure,
and
for sure. Great points all around, Elena. I want to give Diogo also an opportunity here to weigh in this. We got a lot to get through here. But Diogo, to Elena's point, we have a president in the White House who's very eager to make deals. We just talked about the deal that he's seeking on the Ukrainian front. We also know he's looking squarely at Russia and its rare earth supply as well. But as Elena alluded to, China is already firmly entrenched in Russia, and the Russian economy is very dependent on the world's second biggest economy. How is China going to react to all of this? As Enrique just mentioned, this really is at the end of the day, U.S. trying to basically firm up against China.
I would kind of disagree on that. Let me give three brief notes. First of all, there is a problem with the whole issue of the rare earths deal, because most of the rare earths are in occupied zones by Russia. So unless we restore Ukraine to its borders, even the execution of the agreement in whatever form you want to make it is hard. So that would be my first comment. The second comment is a moral one. The way it is presented is kind of a Versailles 1919 in reverse, which means you ask for reparations from the victim rather than the aggressor, which makes not much sense in a moral way. But I would say most importantly is that it is a grand strategy mistake. There is a vision in the US administration that you can, first of all, if you don't make the act of aggression against Ukraine, which I remind is the first after the Second World War, if one excludes Iraq in 91, of trying to unilaterally change frontiers, then why couldn't China invade Taiwan morally? So it completely destroys the framework of the post-1945 framework. Mm-hmm. But besides of that, I think there is a grand strategy mistake on behalf, I would not say in Trump's mind, because I don't think he's reasoning in these terms, but certainly of the administration, that you can be friendly with Russia and split Russia and China apart. I think that's an illusion, because they are wanting to do 1972 in the again. 1972 was when Nixon and Mao had the meeting, and then you had the Chinese splitting from the Soviets. But that was on back of even a war between Soviet Union and China in '68. So the split was already there. Now the split is not there. So I think it's an illusion. If you think you are friendly with Russia, then you can split Russia and China apart, because the incentives for Putin doing that are not there. And that is why I think it's a grand illusion. And in fact, it will work against U.S. long-term interests. I mean, leaving aside Europe's interests, but United States long-term security interests of doing this kind of arrangement under an illusion that they can bring Russia to their side in any dealings with China. What I'm more afraid of, and to conclude, is that we are witnessing a kind of a Yalta II, so Russia, China, and the US splitting the world in zones of influence, and this would be much more detrimental to the rest of the world's security.
Enrique, your thoughts on this situation as the U.S. clearly makes the play for minerals in Ukraine. It's clearly saying it's in advanced talks with Russia with respect to rare earth supply there, and of course the China factor that you addressed off the top. What are your thoughts on what your colleagues are presenting here?
Okay, first and foremost, I want to say I'm a European from Spain, and I empathize 100% with Ukraine situation, and for the last 3 years, I consider the invasion kind of a very unfair, at last, thing to say. But in order to ask for rare earths, for example, and we know that Russia and China are splitting Africa, just looking for those rare earths, and I know for sure that probably the United States are looking for those as well on the Ukraine, and that could be one of the deal breakers of whatever is going to happen on the Ukraine post-war treaties and so forth. I know for sure that of course this is a three sides game, in which four sides game, in which one is Europe, the other one is the United States, the third one is China, and the fourth one is Russia, and they're now playing on the same equilibrium between them, right? But I know for sure that if United States do a favor to Russia, probably in the next future, Russia can do a favor on their behalf. In front of China to the United States. I think this is kind of I don't know how to call it, pool game, a billiard game in a square, in order to throw a ball on one of the walls and try to rebound at any one of them. I mean, it's more an action reaction thing than just a question alone about Ukraine. Right, and I know for sure that one of the things that that Russia wants is a clear pass on the Donbass in order to reach Crimea and get a pass to the Mediterranean with one only country to speak to, which is Turkey. And this is the complexity of the scenario we're talking about. And probably my bet is on that if the United States can do a favor to Russia, the next step is Russia doing a favor to the United States on their behalf with China, and that is, I think, that is what the Trump stability goes through, just trying to make that status quo the most profitable for the United States that they can get, and Europe is just in the middle of everything, and I think we have all the right, as much as Ukraine does, all the right to be part of the conversations and to be part of that table, because without Europe, you can get anything done in this part of the world as well.
Elena, Enrique mentioned Turkey. We know that during the Riyadh talks between Russia and the United States, of course, Europe was excluded from that. Ukraine was excluded for that. The president of Ukraine was in Turkey with President Erdogan. Do you see perhaps a way forward where perhaps Turkey could play a role in assisting Zelensky in moving forward, whether it's striking a dignified deal, if you will, to deal with the U.S.? And I say this all in light of the fact that we've got the UN Security Council now taking a neutral position with respect to the conflict. Elena, what cards does Zelensky have at this stage to play with?
Well, I think that Ukraine's main bet right now should be on Europe, to have Europe at the table and to have Europe not excluded from any talks, because we have to understand that, as one of the experts very rightly mentioned, this war is not only about Ukraine, some kind of bilateral issue between Russia and Ukraine. This is just the first theater of Russia trying to restore its empire. Putin said that the collapse of the Soviet Union has been the largest mistake of the century. And if Russia wins in Ukraine, they will move forward. They will move westward. They will try to grab the territories of the sovereign countries that are right now members of NATO, which means that Ukraine's security is Europe's security. And Europe has the skin in this game, because right now Ukraine is shielding Europe from this aggression. And Europe is highly technological. Europe does have the opportunity and chances to scale up the defense production. Unfortunately, they failed to do this over the last 3 years, but maybe President Trump's signals would finally be the cold shower for them to make the right decisions. So I think that us continuing cooperate with Europe is a very important way forward. But this is not the only card which we have here. We continue repeating that European partners have frozen Russian assets. Mm-hmm. If we speak about G7, that's $300 billion. If we speak about Europe alone, it's a bit more than $220 billion. That's the assets of the Russian central bank, right, which were immobilized in the first days of the full-scale war. And if Europe confiscates those assets and uses them for Ukraine, for our defense, for our fortification, reconstruction, and compensation to the victims, that would significantly strengthen Ukraine's negotiation stance.
Okay, well, it's a very fluid situation, lots of moving parts, and we certainly, on the third anniversary, just saw a lot of movement here. Olena Halushka, Diogo Castro Silva, and Enrique Cosero, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on Context on A News.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Anita Sharma. You're watching A News. Have a great day.